Okay, I believe we are officially opening the executive session. It's 7:01.
You want to open the general session first?
All right, open the general meeting, planning board meeting. Time is 7:01 p.m. on Tuesday, February 13th. So roll call vote for opening the meeting. Addie May, aye. Rob Wolf,
Aye.
Frank Hoke,
Aye.
and Will Denham. I think you're trying to give me a thumbs up. You get your mute off.
You're muted, yeah.
Let's see, I can't do it for you, can I? Let's see. Will,
Will, can you just give a thumbs up if you can?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. All right. So since open session has been commenced, we are now closing open session, or not closing, we are exiting open session to go into, we're going into
A motion to go into executive, a motion to go.
Commence, sorry. So frantic trying to get dinner out. Go into executive session.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Roll call vote.
Roll call vote. Addie May, aye. Rob?
Aye.
Frank?
Aye.
And Will?
Aye.
Okay, let me stop the recording.
Sorry to interject real quick. Could you please notify the public that you'll be returning to open session after executive, and also have the chair declare that an open session would have a detrimental effect on the town's litigating position?
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, you're supposed to read that little statement.
Wait, do I? This, is it on where? Sorry.
It was on the agenda.
It's on the agenda. Thank you.
It's posted.
Yes, and I had it. Oh, I guess I lost it when I clicked on the.
Would you like me to read it? I think I can. I can read it.
You have it open? Is that
Well,
allowed?
actually, I have it open, but I don't see the wording for it. Oh, here it is. Yes. No, it's just as pursuant to the discussion of the strategies of litigation and obligation advice. That's all it says.
Okay.
It lists usually an MGL section.
Yeah, well, yeah, it says pursuant to GLC 330 A 21A3 to discuss the strategy. So you want me to read? I can read that if you
Yeah,
like.
it's that whole thing. You read the whole thing, Heather, usually?
Yes, that followed by a statement of the chair that an open session would have a detrimental effect on the town's litigating position.
So I can, yeah, so we will be reopening the meeting anticipated at 7:30. Again, it's pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation, Hudson Walker v. Sherborn Planning Board, Land Court 23, miscellaneous 000398. And because to discuss this meeting in an open session would have a detrimental effect on matters for the town of Sherborn, we are going into executive session, and a motion to enter into executive session. Did I have a second?
Second.
Frank?
Yes.
So having a second now, roll call vote. Addie Mae Weiss, aye. Rob Wolf?
Aye.
Frank Hoke?
Aye.
And Will Denham?
Aye.
So give us a few minutes to get everybody back in.
Okay, that's who we have right now. Everyone is in. I don't know if you'd like to read the meeting minutes and make a motion maybe to amend the
The-
minutes.
Minutes or the agenda?
The agenda, sorry.
Sorry, I'm just, I'm at
I'm
it.
looking at Steph saying she's taking minutes. I'm taking
So,
minutes.
okay, welcome. We have reopened the open session. Welcome back to the open session of the planning board meeting of February 13th. The time is now 7:50 p.m. Do we need to do roll call to open the meeting?
We already opened the meetings
Already open, so
first.
we're resuming the open meeting. Okay. So the agenda for tonight for open session is the first item for discussion is the reorganization of the planning board. Second item for discussion is the vacancy policy and options. And the fourth item for discussion is consideration of building zoning administrative changes for the warrant was what was posted. Are there additions to the agenda? I believe there are. We received late last Friday, so less than, was it 48 hours before this meeting, clearly. We received a letter from the former DHCD, now office, OELCD, the housing office, with some concerns or with some points for clarification on our 3A zoning bylaw. And I'd like to add to our agenda that we, just in light of the hearing next Tuesday, that we are able to maybe discuss the 3A zoning, to add this to agenda. Is everyone okay with, do we need to, can I have a motion to add the 3A discussion to our agenda for tonight?
So moved.
And second?
Second.
Thanks. So moved and second by Rob and Frank. All right, so we will discuss that at the as the fourth items, what are the final item for tonight. We'll come back to that. All right, so then the first item on the agenda is
Addie
the,
May,
yes.
I'm sorry, procedural question here. Are you going to vote on that motion? or-
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
vote to add the item to the agenda. Addie May is aye. Rob Wolf,
Aye.
Will,
Aye.
and Frank.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Thanks everyone for keeping us straight. All right, so the first item for the agenda is the reorganization of planning board. Chris Owen resigned as of February 7th. And so I believe we need to elect.
Adding me, just Jeff, you have 3 members. I think that's a quorum for the select board here. You got Eric, Stephen, and yourself.
Yeah, we do. I have to check though. I'm not sure if we posted a meeting for this. Do people know, did we post a select board meeting? If not, one of us, I'll just leave.
We didn't post a meeting,
uh,
but nonetheless, we actually, as long as we don't discuss amongst ourselves,
Right.
we got that opinion from council like months ago. We can ask individual questions. Just have to be careful, like me answering a question that you ask, and so on and so forth.
Yeah,
He's
apologize.
not going to say anything.
Yeah, I
All right.
promise to shut up.
All right. So thanks for the invite, Frank, and apologize for being late.
So reorganization of the planning board. I understand that we need to have a clerk. We had voted at the last meeting on a chair, but do we need to redo that process? Is that what we've been informed that we?
I don't think we have to. I think you're voted as a chair is fine. It's just we don't have a clerk,
Okay.
and that's required by the general town's bylaws.
Okay. Do we have a nomination for a planning board clerk? There.
Guess that's gotta be me or Frank, right?
Or Will, are you interested in that position? You're muted.
Yep. I'd be happy if Rob or Frank, you guys wanted to do it.
You'd be happy with that.
Okay, I'm thinking of a number, 1 or 2. Who gets it?
Rob, what do you say? What do you want?
I have not been able to attend as many meetings as the others, so I'm not totally comfortable with it, but if nobody else will do it, I will do it. But I have some other commitments that have forced me in the past to miss, I don't know, probably 25% of the meetings. So,
So I make a motion to nominate Frank Hoke. You're it.
Nobody seconded, so that means no, I'm not it.
I'll second that.
Okay, thanks. So, moved and seconded. All those in favor of Frank Hook being the planning board clerk, Addie May is aye. Will Denham,
Aye.
Rob Wolf,
Aye.
and Frank Hook.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone. As far as the process for filling the remainder of the planning board term that's been there, that we have a vacancy until the next election, which is coming up in May. The process is we need to formally notify the select board of the vacancy. I had drafted a letter
But with him having 3 members here, does that also qualify as formal?
no, I don't think so, because they are not in session. So but the I don't know, I had sent it, basically the letter had one sentence, and it just simply said that as of February 7th, the planning board has a vacancy to fill until it may be filled by election and for the select board. But Jeff, yes, give some clarity.
It just has to be in writing. I think
Yeah.
it's required to be in writing is the distinction, Frank.
Okay,
it
but
sounds
in,
like-
but,
that's-
but
sounds
in,
like-
excuse me, but in writing, with the person who resigned giving you the resignation letter, isn't that also kind of indicating in writing?
It indicates there's an opening, but the planning board has to just notify, it's just a detail, but they have to notify us of that they have an opening, even though the resignation letter implies that. But I think it's already happened anyway.
So I guess really what I need from everyone is everyone okay with me sending the formal letter to the select board, indicating like I said, it was one line. I am sharing the proposed letter.
Can you make it a little bit larger?
Yeah, so dear Sherborn Select Board members, this letter is behalf on planning board membership to provide official written notice to the select board of an immediate vacancy as of February 7th, 2024 on the Sherborn Planning Board as prescribed by procedure set forth in General Law, Chapter 41, Section 11, and Section 81A. The planning board would like to have the position filled as the general law allows to serve the interim weeks until the open 2-year remaining term is filled by town election process. That's typo. Can I have a motion to support sending this letter
So
to the
moved.
board?
Second.
Second. Okay, all in favor, Rob,
Aye.
Will,
Aye.
Frank,
All right.
and Addie May is aye as well. So we will send the letter so that it is official in writing. And as part of the process, I believe everyone has received there have been clarification sent by the town clerk that that the 2-year term would go on the election as ballot as well as the 3-year term. And for the interim, the process is interested applicants should complete the same application that's used anytime there is an opening that the select board appoints. So there is an application on the town website. It's a pretty generic application. It's not unique to planning board or any one board. It's just simply an application stating your interest in serving the town, and giving a little bit of contact information and background for the select board review. So if there are others interested for the several week interim position,
And who should they send that to? Is that also indicated there?
I believe it should be sent to the town planner as well as I believe Diane Morris,
It's
assistant town
To,
administrator.
to HR, which basically is going to be Diane and Jeremy. So if they send it to Diane and Jeremy, and I think it might say that on the application. That would be great. And then it's going to be, I think, Jeff, it's a meeting with the planning board and the select board to review the applicants.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think it's, we have some special meetings set up, but it's not gonna be at those meetings. I think it's whatever the next select board meeting is. I want to say the 22nd. I'm not sure the exact date,
2
whatever
weeks,
it is.
yeah.
A week, 2 weeks from last Thursday, whatever it is. I think it might
Yeah.
be the 22nd, but whatever night
Yeah.
that is, I think it's already on the agenda.
Okay. So I believe at this point we are onto the portion of the agenda that is we have Chris Canny, our building commissioner, to discuss some language issues. I will preface that it's my understanding at the moment the warrant is closed and is likely to remain closed as the select board requires full language of all warrant articles by February 22nd. And so there is, I guess even though frequently we think of we've got so much time because town meeting is April going forward. I think we kind of understood this, but didn't really realize the timeline, the depth of the details of, everything for town meeting is really set pretty well set by the end of February. So, but that being said, I think it's really important that we have Chris here to walk us through some of these proposals because they should be discussed, and having since he's the one that's out there, having to uphold these language issues, it makes a lot of sense to walk through these now and to then have this discussion again. So, Chris, would you like to, I'm going to hand this over to you before I ramble on too much.
Sure, thank you. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. So what I've got in front of you tonight is probably the easiest bunch of zoning bylaw changes we'll see in a while. Which doesn't mean that this is all that needs to get fixed in the bylaw, but it's probably a sensible place to start with some things that have been happening in town in the last few years. And hopefully none of this is very objectionable. So I'm terrible at using Zoom. I don't know, Addie, if you can share the document, or Heidi, if you can share the document that I sent over. But this is like 4 changes. The first of which is
It's on the
related
public
to.
packet.
I can show it right now. How's that?
Perfect. Thank
Thanks.
you. So this first change is straightforward. The town, as you know, has a pretty restrictive zoning bylaw as far as uses go. And sort of one of the only places where we allow some flexibility is for home and professional occupations, home occupations being a type of occupation that doesn't require any sort of special permit. It's just an allowed by right use within a house, and it's typically like offices and things like that. Professional occupations takes that sort of to the next step where it potentially has an employee or other things like that. Anyway, it's still very restrictive as far as not being it's not making any sort of public display of business happening on a property, but it allows people to have some businesses that aren't just like a a traditional office might be. And so one of the things that we've always had in this bylaw is that it doesn't permit any sort of exterior storage of materials or equipment, including the parking of commercial vehicles, which it just gives the board this kind of really narrow definition of what they can allow. So this, you wouldn't be able to have somebody that's a carpenter cabinet maker kind of a person that has a vehicle that they need to park outside. They'd have to have an indoor parking area for it. You wouldn't be able to have somebody that has, a small trailer that they take around to go do jobs or something like that. Anyway, so the idea of this was to allow the zoning board of appeals to have a little bit of flexibility if somebody's asking for something that does require some exterior storage, the board can grant that through this change to the bylaw, where we're going to say that we will allow outside storage of vehicles and equipment when expressly permitted by the board. Anyway, it's a pretty simple change. Hopefully, it's a tool that the ZBA can use. I know in the past they've actually broadened this definition to allow some businesses to exist that do have outside storage, as long as it was screened. So this is just kind of taking that and putting it into the bylaw itself. So, any questions on this one? I hope it makes sense.
And you've spoken to Rick Novak already about all these.
Correct. Yeah, and Rick thought that was a good idea because he acknowledged that there's been a few cases in town where the board has allowed exterior storage where the bylaw specifically says they're not supposed to. So he would like to have this available to him, and it's certainly not going to be every case where it's asked for is it going to be granted, but it gives them an opportunity to be a little bit more flexible than they have been.
Yeah, that's what sounds good about this, that at least there is somebody that could oversee what it is the plan is for that additional thing and whether it makes sense or not based on the individual case. So
yeah, I mean, there's so
think it
many
makes
properties
sense.
in town that are essentially not visible from the road. It seems crazy to say you can't have a truck with your name on it, parked in your driveway where no one can see it. Anyway. The next one, if we're done with that one, was to take the small accessory shed section that was added in 2018 and to tweak that. And so this bylaw has been great. A lot of people have taken advantage of the language that's already been added to the bylaw in 2018, which was the one where a small structure, a small shed would get relief on the side and rear yard setbacks, assuming it met the dimensional requirements of this section. And this is just taking that idea and expanding it to structures that aren't just sheds. People have certainly had a lot of interest in building pavilions and pergolas and a lot of other things in their backyards, especially as the pandemic happened. We had a lot of outside living spaces get built in town, outdoor kitchens with little roofs over them, that kind of thing. So the idea is, is there really a difference between that and a shed? And the way that the bylaw was written, it was very specific that it was a shed. So anyway, the idea here is to expand that to include other sort of typical accessory structures, still not for parking, still not greater than 250 square feet, still not greater than 1.5 stories or the distance from the lot line in height. So it's still fairly restrictive, but again, it gives us the ability to have some other things that hopefully don't, doesn't cause any issues with the neighbors.
So to me, that sounds okay. There is this yellow highlighted, including ground mount solar.
Yeah, that was a question that came up. Typically, if there is, an accessory, all these different things that people are putting in their yards, whether it be a shed or a garage or whatever, it's generally accessory to the house or the residential use. And then the question came up of if we were going to have, ground mount solar. Is this something where we would say if the array meets the area criteria and the height criteria, are we going to allow that to also be half the setback distance, or are we going to restrict this to not include that kind of structure.
So to me, a solar array is very different from all these other ones.
I agree. Yeah.
In two respects, and they're really kind of opposite respects in my mind, if let me say. One is, a shed or an arbor or a pavilion can be aesthetically not so bad looking, so that if you see it or the neighbors see it, it's not, a blight or an eyesore. Solar panels are not beauty. It's beauty in the eyes of the beholder. Not everybody loves them. But the challenge you do have with them, though, is that you're often restricted to where the sun shines and where is the best location for them. And that sometimes could be in that potential area where, it needs to sit there so that you can maximize the sun, which then would enhance the town's position on reducing climate change and greenhouse gas emissions and so on. So has a benefit on that side, but it also has a drawback. So I just want to raise that as an issue to think about in this regard.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I feel like the whole solar, I mean, granted, we are this is referring to just someone it doesn't work on their roof, but there are a number of residences around town who have ground mounted that are low and approximately the size of a small shed. And I guess, well, we're not necessarily deciding anything on this for town meeting at the moment, but I don't know. Chris, what are you seeing in other towns regarding ground mount solar arrays?
Not a lot yet. I think it's coming the same way that Sherborn is trying to address the sort of medium-sized solar systems that now are allowed by right through 40A. I think that towns are slow to adopt this kind of thing. My concern would just be, as you said, there's certainly less aesthetically attractive usually, and usually a reflective type surface. So potentially the impact on the neighbor is different than it would be if it was just a traditional roof or some other non-reflective surface. But at the same time, I don't really see. I'm of two minds about it, I guess. Yeah, it could certainly be advantageous to people to be able to have that flexibility for where they can put them. I completely understand that. It might be something that we would just add a category to say, this particular section doesn't include solar panels, but we could create some sort of relief for their setbacks through a special permit process. I mean, that might be a simple way to address it and say we're going to treat them differently, but we're not going to say you can't do it. 15 feet from the lot line, something
Could
like
it
that.
could it be that we don't include it in this and that we have a separate subsection for solar mounted arrays and some parameters around how that could work out as opposed to just by special permit?
I think that would be a great way to do it. Yeah.
As far as from the planning board perspective, now that since we have the opportunity to have Chris here, does anyone have concerns over the redlined recommendations?
Not including the ground mount solar, I think
No,
this section was good.
I believe the ground mounted solar would require some proposed language. I think all of us are not, I mean, I my sense is that maybe it should be a little bit better spelled out, but not including ground mounted solar for the ideas that being the structures.
In this section you're talking about.
Yes. I
Right.
guess we're not spelling out kitchens, and so then a ground mounted solar array, is that a structure?
Right.
You spell out every single structure and that's the pitfall. I guess what's the minimum setback requirement shown in 4.2 is what is it again?
Well, it depends on the zoning district, but
And
it's
then
typically either 30 feet or 40 feet. And so this bylaw has allowed people to go down to, 15 feet or 20 feet, depending on what zone they're in.
It's on the next page if you scroll down.
A question, one of the things that I saw someplace else, not here, at least I haven't seen yet, Chris, maybe you have. Some places that I've been, that people have actually been putting like a heated shed in their backyard where it ends up being an office. Have you seen that at all?
Again, all of this stuff sort of happened more often during the pandemic as people, we're trying to do more work at home, find places where they could exist on their properties. So yes, there's a handful of conditioned sheds out there, or semi-conditioned sheds out there that have become, people's little accessory spaces. Not a lot, but yeah, there's a few of those. And they generally speaking fall into that category of a sort of typical accessory structure. So I don't know. Do we want to move on from that one?
Yeah, I think we're at the point to look at the other one, the next
Okay.
one.
So the next one is just if you roll up there, it's adding a sentence to the end of table 4.2, which is the dimensional regulation table. And this one I think is pretty cut and dry. This is just formalizing a policy that has, I think, been pretty well adopted by most surveyors in town as they bring lots in front of the planning board. But it basically says that you must maintain the lot width continuously between the frontage line and the setback line, so that you kind of have a block of area at the front of the property before it can narrow down to the minimum 50-foot width that's allowed. And this is, again, something that I think most surveyors have just done, assumed. We had the challenge to this concept on Farm Road, if you remember, the A&R with the little fork tines. So this is kind of saying, we denied that. We didn't like that. We want to make sure that doesn't happen again. So this is the language that eliminates the idea of the fork tine approach, or other sort of weird shapes up at the front of the property.
Is it right to say minimum lot width there? Doesn't it mean, is that the intent, or is the intent that the setback, that the frontage requirement is maintained between the frontage
So
and
it's
setback?
the measurement is the same. And so because we're measuring not at the frontage point, it would be considered lot width during, in that section that we're measuring. You could argue both ways, I suppose. If you want, I can bring it to town council and see if they have a preferred terminology, but it's the measurements are the same. And I think functionally speaking, once we get behind that frontage line, now we're measuring width.
For some reason, Frank, on the version that you're sharing, the table is not showing up.
Right.
I see it on my screen. There's the part of it. So you can see that minimum lot width is actually the fourth column in the table itself. So the footnote just connects to that, I believe.
Yeah. And like I said, the minimum lot width and the minimum continuous frontage are the same, at least within the residential districts where we're talking about doing this. So, sorry if you can hear my children, they're all getting ready to go to bed. Anyway, so yeah, so the idea here is just to formalize something that hadn't been expressly stated in the bylaw before, but has been sort of the rule that most surveyors have followed for 100 years in Sherborn. But if we need to change that language, we can. Rick liked this. He added the word continuously. He wanted to continuously maintained between the frontage and the setback line. But other than that, he was happy.
Yeah, I guess the chart didn't come through on my version either, so.
Okay, sorry about that.
I just put a screenshot in the chat. If you can open the chat, you can hopefully grab that
See.
screenshot and see it. Or I can share my screen if that's
Okay,
better.
can you see it on my screen now with me opening up the chat?
No, because
No.
Zoom shares a program, not a screen. You have to unshare and reshare if you want to do that.
Steph, if you have it, Frank, can you
I
stop
can.
sharing for a second? Is it okay, Steph, for you to share?
Sure.
Eric Johnson has a hand raised.
Eric, yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. I thought the whole thing with those wacky A&Rs we saw on Farm Road was due to the definition of width and not due to, I thought all the A&Rs before that actually held the actual like minimum lot width through the frontage to the house. Then it let you narrow 50 feet and go up. So it was actually more
Right.
conservative. And it was a
No,
definition of width, which
well, so
actually
that
was the problem, not so much defining 50 feet between the front and the frontage lot and the setback, I should say.
the
Mhm.
the issue on Farm Road was if you read this, and I'm glad you've shared the screen. The interpretation used on those lots was that the width needs to be measured only at the front setback line and at the building line, to maintain the width, and anything in between there could go down to 50 feet. That was the sort of weird interpretation, which has not really been what anybody else has ever proposed. Now there is also issues with the definition of building line, and that's a whole nother can of worms. And I know the planning board has talked about that, I think in the past, about trying to change the way that that's written. I didn't want to broach that subject with this one because this seemed like an easy add to hopefully clarify this specific issue of the sort of fork tine idea. But
I mean, it's my opinion that what was being interpreted before was even more conservative than this. If you want to put this in, that's fine too. But I think it was already so conservative. It was being interpreted before that, this probably be fine. But nonetheless, what was proposed on Farm Road was so out there and so crazy. I would have supported town council services to fight that, and that wouldn't have stood up in court. There's
Right.
no way that crazy little maze would have stood up in court. It was something that's so obvious against any intent, and there's only so much you can write dimensional requirements. You know what I mean? You can write something and put little words in every time something strange comes up. That you can put this in there. I just don't know how much is really gonna change anything for real. You know what I mean?
Right,
And if
right.
you see something so nuts as that, and I've talked to Bob about this. I've talked to him how crazy that was. I would have fought that, and he knows that. And I would have certainly encouraged any town council, legal services to fight those crazy A&Rs. That to write something to address something that crazy. I mean, you can do it. I just don't know how much it's going to really add anything. It might just get you in further trouble because you can go in this rabbit hole of writing for the craziest things you've ever seen.
Right.
And at some point, there's unintended consequences.
I mean, the other approach is, and this is in several other towns' bylaws, is just some sort of generic language that says, lots shall be created, and shall not be irregular, right? And then it's up to somebody to determine what irregular means. But that kind of language exists in several towns. I'm sure because people got away with some really weird looking lots over the years. But
And that like I said, any reasonable person looking at what was posed on Farm Road would never have called that regular. Would have called that the stupidest thing they've seen. And I've seen perhaps scores of A&R lots in my job and everything else. And that was something that just like, I hate to write a law around that stupidity.
right. Well,
Absurdity, let's call it.
this seemed like a pretty minimal ad, and I don't think it's something that's going to come back to bite us too much in the end. But point taken. Yeah, we can only do so much.
We can only do so much, but at the
Right.
same time, it is nice to try and add clarity. So I do think that there is, regardless of what happened, even though that some of the prompting was the scenario on Farm Road, I do think that this sentence adds some clarity and has value. And I don't know if anyone
The last thing I'll say is because before this, the interpretation was you had to hold that width through the setback, and somehow they found some weasel language. And even when 8 years out, I was on the A&R, and the A&R my parents did, and everything else, all held that 150 feet, for the RA, all through the what do you call it, through that setback line. And this one is even looser than that. I worried that some ways we're going to give that up by putting this in there. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like all the other A&Rs until those crazy ones held 150, 200, 250 up through the setback. And now it's almost like you're kind of allowing it to go into that weird little thing, then 50 feet, and
Well, that has always been allowed. That 50-foot width has been allowed, and there's going back historically, there's a lot of properties that have that. They have kind of a flag of width at the street, then they narrow to a very skinny thing, and then there's a big, chunk of land at the back of the lot. There's a whole lot of those in town. Gino and I looked those up a few, 2 years ago.
I'd like to talk
And-
more about that because not since 2008. Since 2008, when I first stepped on the planning board, there was never, actually since 2006, I think when my parents did an A&R in their property, maybe it was even more than that. No, that was probably 2003. They were holding the width of the whatever the minimum lot width through that. So I mean that's been 20 years they've been holding that, with the exception of the crazy ones on Farm Street, which again would support council services to fight it. I'm worried that this will make it actually less restrictive on what's been enforced over the last 20 years. I don't think anything in the last 20 years has had like one tiny bit over and then 50 feet up. I think ever since then, it's always been whatever, 152, 200 to the setback, and then you can go in. And that's not so bad.
Well, that's what this is saying, though. This is saying you're going to maintain that 150-foot width until you get to the setback line.
Oh, okay, minimum law. Okay, I'm sorry, maybe I misinterpreted. I thought you could go right to 50 feet.
No. This is saying that you got to have at least 60 feet of depth at the full width before you're allowed to reduce to 50 feet. Which again,
Okay, I apologize.
every surveyor has always interpreted it to mean that. But
Yeah.
again, we had that challenge on Farm Road where they didn't want to sort of go with precedent. So this is supposed to be saying you must maintain that width at least the 60-foot depth.
Okay. I'm sorry, I had misinterpreted this being to the 50
Well, we
feet, but okay.
started without
No,
having the chart in front of us, and it does
Yeah,
help.
sorry about that.
The residence A is 150, residence B 200, residence C 250. So
Yep.
it's saying that yes, you go the continuous maintain between frontage and the setback line, and then the setback lines have their
no, I see.
60. But yeah.
That's what I get for not paying as much attention until this item came up. But no, thank you very much for that. And that's good because I'll tell you, in general, I've actually been kind of liberal with A&R lots because I like A&R development more than subdivision development. I think it makes for more unique housing stock. But however, again, what I saw on Farm Street, changed me a little bit on that.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. So yeah. So the idea here is that we're just formalizing that. If there's no other comments from the board, we'll go to the last one, which is sort of the most involved of this round of changes. Now, this is an issue that is sort of unique to Sherborn because of the way that we measure grade. So we have a 35-foot height restriction, which is pretty common to most other towns around us. But we measure our grade differently than pretty much any other town around. We measure to the lowest point of the perimeter of the house on each side, and then we use that point as the elevation for the side. So if you had a walkout basement that's only a portion of a back wall of a house, you would basically run that elevation for the entire length of the back wall of the house, even though it may only be a short section of the wall. So if you had a 100-foot foundation, say, and a 20-foot walkout, you would count the walkout elevation for the whole 100-foot length of the wall. And what it does is it artificially pushes that average grade number lower than it really is as far as how a person would interpret it. If you were looking at the house, you wouldn't, I don't think that the average grade is where it is based upon using the lowest point. Anyway, so the idea here is to just use average grade the way that most other towns do, the way that the building code does. And if you've got multiple grades along a wall section, you can measure each section and account for the height sort of at each section of the wall. And as long as you do that, you come out with an average grade, and it still is going to be weighted based upon the actual elevations around the structure. It's just not weighted to the lowest point; it's weighted to the actual average. So the idea here was to change the definition of average lowest finish grade, make it just average finish grade. You can see the changes in red, and then there's several references to this throughout the bylaw, so we have to change those as well. So that everything points in the right direction. And
Yeah, I
I'll tell
mean,
you, this has been a problem on probably 80% of the new construction houses in town. This has been an issue to try to make the heights work. You know, people are getting really they're having issues with walkout basements. They're having issues with drive under garages. It doesn't make, you know, the house look any taller or shorter from the street necessarily, but it impacts what that overall height is.
because I guess if you wanted to add a walkout basement, you have the same house, but you've cut the wall to add that walkout basement. The measurement point changes of where that wall is.
Right, right, and so because you're multiplying that measurement by the entire length of the wall as opposed to just the section of the wall that you're dealing with for the walkout, it really makes a big difference. You know, if you've got a four-sided house and you've only got a walkout on a little portion of the back wall of it, it really impacts your grading quite a bit. So I've had people like jog foundations so that they can argue that each section of the foundation can be measured differently. It's really been a challenge for some builders. So
I think Chris got frozen. I don't know if anyone else is frozen. If does this make
Well,
sense to people? This topic.
Well, I'd like to hear how this could be construed in a negative fashion. You know, you're certainly bringing up the positive faction of why this should happen, but what potential negative effects could changing this have? I don't know.
I don't necessarily, I mean, as Chris mentioned, this is really the taking out that lowest, that with the word lowest brings it in line with standard building code and the way most of the other towns are utilizing the definition. I mean, I think it's we all kind of the 35-foot height limit is something that is fairly standard across towns, and we can visualize what 35 feet looks like. And I don't know that this lowest finished grade, not sure exactly where it originated. I don't know. Eric, do you have any insight from all your years of planning board? If is there anything that you've heard? Eric's closed his video, so he might have gotten pulled away. I don't know, Heidi, have you? I know.
Chris is trying to log back in. He lost power for a second.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we can bear with him for a minute. I don't think there is really an unintended consequence of changing that from my understanding of hearing. I know this is something that has been problematic for people in town throughout years in new construction, single family houses. And I know that this is something that seems to have been somehow Gino's been involved. Gino, as the previous town planner, was in conversations about this for a number of years, but we just never somehow got it in front of the planning board to understand and look at and understand that it was something that probably should be cleaned up. Like, all of these things are things that are fairly simple language changes, but really do make a lot of difference for kind of how it is to do what we think of as, if it's your home and your property, reasonable changes without feeling like everything has got to be through a million hoops.
Addie, I can't raise my hand when I'm sharing screens. I just have a quick clarification question while we're waiting for Chris to come back. I know you mentioned the warrant is closed. I know we went back and forth a couple times on this. Can you please clarify if there is a placeholder for this in the warrant right now, or if it was removed?
There is no placeholder. I guess, I know we had our planning board session, our first planning board meeting, January 2nd, and I believe Chris had tried to get this on the agenda. Chris Canny, our building inspector, and unfortunately, we did not have the opportunity to discuss this at, I don't believe it was put on the agenda since, the previous chair decided, not to put it up for discussion. So I have learned that it is too late to add anything to the agenda.
Okay, that was my recollection as well. I just wanted to make sure that
So,
I was understanding.
it is too late to add to the agenda, to the warrant, to add a new warrant article. The warrant is closed, so we won't be able to get it on this spring town meeting, but given that it's been many years of, kind of that these issues have come up, I felt it was still important to have Chris here to talk through some of these, because better that we understand directly from the horse's mouth what some of these issues are. He is the one that is out there working with homeowners and working with contractors and trying to explain and trying to enforce the zoning bylaws. And so he sees how these bylaws are applied, and he sees maybe the pitfalls in some of the language and the unclarity of some of our language. And if there's ways that we can make things cleaner, it's always a good thing.
All right, I think Chris is back if you want to ask the question about what would be the negative effects.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry about that. We lost power for a minute.
I was just asking the,
Oh, go ahead, Frank.
I was just asking the question, not having worked with or having to implement these bylaws, if there could be any unintended consequences or negative effects of changing this word lowest to, just eliminating it, other than the positives that you had talked about.
Sure. I mean, obviously it's a change, right? It's not going to make a huge difference, I will say, as far as how the grade is measured. But sometimes you don't need a huge difference when you're building a new house, my guess is that something like this, just by being able to measure a portion of the wall instead of the full perimeter of or one side of a structure, is going to result in a difference in overall height of like a foot, maybe 2 feet, from the way that we measure grade. But that's what people are fighting for when they're building houses. And unfortunately, what happens sometimes is people make mistakes and they have no room to make a mistake. They're designing a house to be 35 feet even or 34.99 feet tall, and something goes wrong, and we just have no flexibility in the way that we measure this because we're going to that lowest point, and sometimes you just can't change the grade. So by measuring to the average grade, it just, I think, is a more reasonable approach. It's also more in line with what every other town does. It's the way the building code measures the height as well. So it's not like houses are suddenly going to appear feet taller. But I think it's going to be, if you take the example of we want to build the same house 3 in a row, right? And they're all 35 feet tall. And the first one is on a dead flat lot and there's no walkout and there's no drive under garage. It's just, just flat grade. That house is going to be 35 feet to the top of the ridge, and that's it, right? That's as tall as you can build it. If you're going to use the old bylaw the way it's written now, and you wanted to have a walkout basement, the ridge on that house might be 31 feet, right, from where the level grade is. And if we adopt this, the ridge of the house might be 33 feet. So it's not going to be like a huge difference. It's certainly not going to make the houses taller, but it's going to restrict that overall height that you end up with. We sort of artificially lower the height by having this weird way of measuring grade. So anyway, I mean, I can think of several houses where like, certainly one on South Main Street where the builder actually had to cut the roof off um, to make it work with the height and the grade that he had. And I just don't think that that's a good place to be. That's for something that reads it, from the front, it looks exactly the same. They just happen to have a little walkout area in the back, and it kind of messed up the overall height. So the idea with this is that it gives us a little bit more wiggle room in the way that height's measured. So if you had 90% of your foundation is at one grade and 10% is at the other, you only get dinged for the 10%. You don't get dinged for a quarter of your of the way that you measure this thing with that low spot. So anybody else with questions?
So I mean, also, if, if there is not a mechanism for adding this to this Springtown meeting, but the process in general would be that we would have a hearing on these. So at some point we will have a hearing and have it posted, and people in town, like for all warrant articles, will have a chance to weigh in and learn prior to it going forward. So this is not the end of the discussion, but like I said, it was valuable to have Chris here to walk us through these things and for us to understand, just I think there are some other areas that could be cleaned up, but
Yeah, if we know that we've got some time before this actually hits a warrant, there's certainly a few other things in the bylaw that would be beneficial to tweak. And I think something like this with the height, I can put a couple examples together or something that might change the graphic it happens that the numbers work with the existing graphic that's in the bylaw, like it's still measured the same way, because they're not anticipating any sort of a walkout situation. But I can give you like a graphic and some measurements that would show you how this works, and sort of the impact it would have on a house.
That'd be good.
Again, we've got time now, so that's fine. I'm happy to put together a little bit of a better sales pitch on this stuff. But
So are we looking at putting this on the agenda again for the late fall, say November timeframe?
Well, I mean, there has been some, who know, I don't know what else will come up. If there was but I think we would talk about it after we get to this town meeting, we should revisit this and discuss this. Because just in the event that there's potentially, if there were, never say never, but there's, it could be a fall town meeting. It's not unheard of. We did it this past fall. We should always be prepared. And so I think it behooves us to continue to have this conversation and be prepared to make sure that we understand these changes and understand what other changes there might be recommended by the building inspector for cleaning up and making it an easier place to build nice things that we all appreciate. We'd like to be able to restrict the things that don't make sense, but right now we're creating things that don't make sense. So
yeah, as I say to a lot of people, it's really hard to build in Sherborn anyway. And then sometimes we have these things in the bylaw that just makes it even harder. And so maybe we don't, it's not to say we're trying to make it easy, but at least we're trying to make it sort of straightforward. If we're going to have these rules, it would be nice if at least they sort of aligned with people's expectations. The way we measure this height thing is so off from everywhere else. It's totally unique. It's weird. And I know it's going to be an issue for like Meadowbrook Commons. They've been asking about if there's any way to seek relief on the height because they want to have walkout basements in that project. I mean, it's something that's going to be coming up in some of these other developments, and so it would be nice to have a way to do it. And we had talked about if it made more sense to do something like this, changing the definition or changing the or adding something to allow a special permit for increased heights, or who knows. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you could approach this. This was the method that Rick Novak liked the best, and I think it's sort of the cleanest way to fix it. But I'm certainly open to any input from you guys or anybody else that has thoughts on this. And obviously we've got time to talk about it, so.
All right, so is there any other questions for Chris? If not, then we would move on to the 3A discussion that came up, but otherwise I'd like to make sure that everyone's had a chance to ask any questions regarding the building zoning bylaw.
This part of it seems extremely straightforward, and I have no qualms about it at all. The whole lot width thing is a little bit confusing, just because the terminology is quite confusing, like lot width is defined in the definitions. And, when you see a term called minimum lot width, you immediately jump to the conclusion that, well, this is the minimum that the width has to be throughout the lot, but it's not. It actually is, we're only saying you have to hold it in this first 60 feet of the lot, and then you can drop down to 50 feet.
Yeah, and actually, if you go to the definition, it also applies where the building, actually, sorry, no, it's the little asterisk. It also applies at the building line, which is an unusual term that only Sherborn has, and it has been something that we need to fix as well. But that's the point at the lot where you can draw a line through the building. It needs to maintain this width as well. It's unusual. Let's just say. So yeah, if you've got ideas for sort of how to make this all, that's like a multi-piece thing where the minimum lot width relates to the building line, which relates to the frontage width. They all sort of go together. So if you change one, you kind of have to change the others.
And I think that some of the maybe, over the last couple of years, maybe some reasons why we haven't brought these changes to town meeting is you start going down this rabbit hole of saying, well, if we change this, then we need to change that, and if we change that, we need to change one more. And I would hope that as a board we could I think we've learned bylaws are not perfect, and it's not necessary that you get everything absolutely perfect in order to put something out there, and that we can learn from mistakes and learn from unintended consequences to bylaws can be amended. It goes to town meeting. But if you have your information out there and it makes sense, that people will support it. So maybe we can't fix everything, but I hope that we will keep taking stabs at trying to clean up. I mean, things change. So
I think in our past discussions too, just from the historical perspective, we've talked about curved streets
right.
and how curved curb lines or frontages calculate with respect to footage of frontage versus width of lot. So it got pretty complicated pretty fast in some of our prior discussions. Just a note, since not everyone here has been there for all of those discussions.
Right. And then I don't know, again, it's usually comes up because there's certain strange interpretations that are few and far between, but enough to make everyone nutty. So but I guess, like, we may not get it right this time, but and that's okay, but if we keep trying. So Chris, thank you for bringing these forward, and we will be discussing this again, and I'll make sure that you're aware if it's on the agenda again, and for everyone to be prepared. So
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
thanks. So then let's see, Steph, you're sharing screen. Is that okay? All right. So the final item on the agenda that was that we added was a reference to the letter that we received late Friday afternoon from, I swear, one of these days, the former DHCD new Office of Executive. Heidi, what do you have it in front of you, or have you memorized it?
It's EOHLC, Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities.
So we have, we had submitted the language, and we've received feedback And the feedback needs to be vetted out. And I believe it will result in changing the bylaw language. And the problem is as I referenced with the zoning bylaw discussion, but the building inspector's recommendations, the select board requires the full language for them to sign off on the warrant by February 22nd. We are having our hearing with the technical consultants next Tuesday, February 20th. I think it's valuable to have this hearing because regardless, we do need to continue to march forward in learning more and educating and allowing opportunities for residents to understand in general the multifamily bylaw and what does it mean. But I have concerns for the same reason that we discussed at our previous planning board meeting, that we didn't have information for this solar, the large scale solar array to go forward with planning board meeting. I mean, with town meeting, because we were waiting for a response that we expected in April from the Attorney General's office. I believe we're in a similar situation where we won't have our language intact to properly go forward, and puts us in a position of having to have something printed and then have advisory be put in a position to vote no action, and maybe falsely appearing that we don't support the state mandated multifamily overlay zoning requirement, when we really have all along attempted to comply. And I would not wish for kind of a confusion to appear that by having something that's not ready so forth. So I guess I don't know how much, because this is a letter that was presented late Friday and we haven't fully gone through with the consultants on where things need to be corrected. I guess maps need to be corrected. We also have, as our past informal meetings about this, several residents would like to be included. Like I said, I do believe it's valuable to open the hearing next Tuesday and have these discussions, but I'm not sure that I think we should make a determination so that select board has their the select board can open a warrant to remove something without giving they can take something off. They can open the warrant and close it and remove something without having to post a lengthy advance notice. In order to add something, is a different beast. So it's not, removing a warrant article is different. Opening the warrant to remove something that's not ready is a different situation than it is to try and add something. So I don't know, Heidi, is there any other clarification that I've kind of overlooked?
No, I think that is correct. The concern I have is what we posted the hearing for. A lot of the areas that they say we needed to make adjustments for may also impact what our zoning bylaw changes are. And I don't know if we've posted for those change. We haven't had time to look to see if we posted now correctly for those changes. So it's just very frustrating that kind of when I came on board, I was told that, this draft was good. We submitted it. We expected to get approved. Well, it wasn't approved. And now we're stuck with having to look at why they're saying it wasn't approved. I also submitted it to the Attorney General's office because they offered to do a pre-review and we haven't heard their comments back yet either. So I just don't feel we're in a great position. If I'm concerned, if we go through with this, we're gonna be back at the next town meeting anyway, asking for changes because now we have comments back from the AG and the state to correct what the town voted on. And I don't know if we want to keep being in that type of a cycle of, yeah, we had you vote on something, but now we're back because we need you to revote certain areas. So I really would, greatest wish would be that we do have a special town meeting in the fall. Maybe there becomes other things in town that this happens and we can present the MBT bylaw one and get then 2 bites, in the sense of if we have a fall town meeting and it doesn't pass, we still have another chance at the spring one because we do not have to comply with this until December 2025. So we do have time, but it'd be nice to have the luxury of having 2 town meeting votes to try and pass it. Also, the solar bylaw one will have the AG's response back somehow they thought by April 4th, which again doesn't give us time to do anything for this town meeting, but if there was something in the fall, we could also respond and get that prepared in a more timely manner. We just don't have enough hours in the day to have everyone read and get caught up to speed and get meetings posted. So
if I could make a couple of remarks. I mean, I think the first off that I believe this is sort of an opposite case from the solar bylaw in that if we just leave the solar bylaw open and don't change it, aren't we sort of leaving ourselves a little bit open? Whereas the 3A zoning, we are adding some additional zoning. And if we decide to wait till another town meeting before adding the additional zoning, it doesn't really hurt. It just means that if we screw it up then we start running against the state's deadline. But the other thing is, I looked through, the bylaw is one of those things that sort of superficially it looks good. And then when I tried reading it in detail, it seems like the language is kind of poorly organized and ambiguous. And, I sent out some comments on where I think this is what the intent is, but I'm not even sure that is what it is meant to do. And it looked like I just skimmed through the letter from the state office quickly, but it looked like that was one of the things they called out in one of their points, that they sounded like they kind of had the same interpretation as I did, but again, they weren't sure that that's what the bylaw was trying to say. Most of the other points, though, seem to be like technical details of, did it meet the state requirements in terms of acreage and such? And I'm wondering, did we submit something with it, which I haven't seen, which is like a set of calculations that said, well, here's what all the areas are, and here's, because that seemed to be what they were objecting to, that maybe some of the calculations that determine whether we really are allowing for our 5% requirement are correct or not. And the bylaw doesn't actually contain those calculations.
And the map didn't show it very clearly either from what I thought they were saying.
It's hard because I haven't been able to find what the actual application is that we submitted on Gino's computer yet. I don't know if it was a state online system, and that's why I don't find a copy of the actual application. I just have a copy of the bylaw and a copy of the maps. There was a consultant hired back then. It was Goldson, I think, who did run through the scenarios, and Gino had said that it did meet the requirements, but I don't have a copy of what the formulas are they used. They did some shape graphs, mappings, and I don't have that. That's one of the things we're gonna have to look into to figure out what they used and try to analyze have them look at why the state has a difference of opinion. But that also means we're probably gonna have to hire the consultants again, to look into this, because that's not part of the existing contract.
But we do have funds. The state gave us
Yeah.
a $30,000 technical assistance grant for this purpose, and we didn't use all of them in the first contract with the consultant. So therefore, reaching out, it would not be an additional cost to the town to get
The
their.
other
So go ahead,
Yeah,
Frank.
the other thing is that I also thought that we had been given the authorization to utilize Gino to help with this, and he was working on getting this through the you know, through the goalposts, and I'm just surprised that you wouldn't be able to ask him to get that document and get that copy of that application, that you wouldn't be able to go down that route.
I mean, Gino has reviewed this. I know he was hired and he as to act as a consultant and kind of be our 3A specialist for town. And I do believe that we will need to utilize him because he was part of the last 2 years working on this or last year, whatever it was. I do feel though that we do need to continue working with JM Goldson and ask them to assist us with these corrections. They are the technical assistance firm that the state recognizes, and Laura Smead and Jennifer Goldson and almost everyone on that staff at one point in time has been hired by the state to they are the experts. They are considered experts by the state for housing issues in the state, for housing, for zoning and planning purposes, for affordable housing throughout the state and multifamily housing. And so since if they say right now we're in a situation where supposedly they said this was okay and it's not, their response recently has been that their technical assistance portion ended, the work that they did ended last fall, and then the work that we've been doing with them is the education advocacy, but they did not do any further technical assistance work because Gino had submitted the application to the state, or submitted the language to the state last fall. So in September, which there was I don't know if it made any changes, but either way, I believe we do need further technical assistance in light of there is a new redlined version as of August, and maybe that was put out by the state after the technical assistance and the bylaw language had been written, and this happens. So yes, Gino will likely be reached out to, but I think it's very important that we again, this is the state recommended consultant, so I believe we should use.
If they were the ones who did the technical work the previous time and it didn't turn out correctly, do we have any recourse? Instead of paying them again, do the same thing that they didn't do right the last time?
Their answer is they did the technical report based on what was submitted to them, and that Gino made some changes after that they did the work, and that wasn't included in that time. So whatever work Gino changed, he didn't think it was going to impact it, but it clearly did impact something. So we need to work it out. I mean, this is just Tuesday. We've just known about this 2 days, so we are trying to figure out, Frank, where these documents are and get it. It's just it's been a scramble lately, and I just am concerned that we don't have a good product to put forward next week to the select board right now.
And just to clarify, we're not under. There's no reason why it has to be this town meeting and not a special town meeting in the fall, right?
Right. We have till 2025 to comply. I think just Chris and Gino thought, let's get ahead of the game. Let's try to do it. It'd be great to have it over with. But now what Milton's going through too, I kind of feel like maybe a little bit of time is okay. Let's see what happens with that scenario. I've already had a couple residents call me to say, well, have you talked to the rep and how are you fighting this? And I was like, well, actually we have people trying to add to it. So, but there are some residents in town that are not interested in this. And I've had the historical commission already call up and ask me about it. And I expect we're going to hear some flack from them as well. So I just think we're really rushing this to try and make a certain deadline that is self-imposed.
Yeah, I don't think it makes sense to put forward a half-baked product or maybe there's no reason to do.
Well, and I think, I mean, we've had some really good meetings and good discussions on this, and I think,
I don't think
continuing
so. I think we've done a poor job because it's the typical kind of thing where it was Chris and Gino and these consultants sitting down together and presenting like a fait accompli to the board. And it just, it's something, we get something in the mail a couple of days before a planning board meeting. We look at it in the meeting. We just don't have time. And part of it is unavoidable due to the open meeting law. You can't have the whole group sit down and work together on something unless it's actually at a meeting. So there's a tendency to do these things sort of in isolation. But I think that may be what's happened here. And, they've written something that kind of, I don't know, to my mind, it's something that kind of looks good if you don't delve into it too deeply. And then you start looking at the details of the wording, and it's like, I can interpret this two different ways. And if I can, other people are too.
Yeah, when I said we've had some good meetings, I wasn't necessarily talking about the bylaw language itself. I meant with the good meetings that we've had about kind of the advocacy and explaining what the overarching 3A multifamily zoning and implications for the town somewhat are. I do agree. I mean, as far as language goes, I know when we were working on the master plan, when we were working on the housing production plan, when we were working on other plans, sometimes it was tedious and painful, but we had meetings where we brought up the bylaw language and we looked at it line by line. And I believe that there may be, hopefully not too many. I know there was a year or so of doing that every Friday for a couple hours with the master plan. Don't want to go in that direction, but I think we got into a place where it was nice to be efficient, but it became too efficient and we lost the dialogue opportunity. So I think we can, we need to revisit the language. We need to revisit how we all need as a planning board to be confident in our understanding of the process. And that is where I think we need to figure out if we hire the technical consultants back to help us work through this, there should be an opportunity for that to be in an open session where we're looking at the language. Yes, some things are done in kind of a working group to get through, the baseline stuff, but yeah, we need. But I guess the other one thing is so for next Tuesday, there is still value in having the hearing opened. Any opportunity to talk through this and look at the language and look at the ramifications is good. The pros and cons. I think what I meant is I think as far as from the state standpoint, the fact that we have been forging ahead is a good thing, that we aren't sticking our heads in the sand and saying we're not going to comply. So I think not bringing it to this town meeting is okay, because we are in communication with both the Attorney General's office and the EOCLD office, HC whatever alphabet office, and so there's that. We're not like some towns that are. We're not unwilling to comply. We are trying to comply, but we'd like to do this correctly. So I guess for next Tuesday, I guess my question is would it be appropriate to do a motion to withdraw this warrant article? I'd like to make a motion to withdraw the warrant article from this town meeting. We still have the discussion next Tuesday, but I'd like it to have the opportunity for the select board to have advance notice to withdraw it, rather than it continuing to go forward and having to be printed as required, and have a situation where it's the only choice is to vote no action, and then it just has a different optic.
I'm sorry, but what is the final deadline for it to go to the printing press? Was that the end of February?
February 22nd, 2 days
February
after
20?
our hearings. There's no way.
And we're not going to get any further information from the consultant by then.
And we won't have had a chance to meet and look at the language. I think we're in a situation where we will need to be, before it's ready for town meeting, we will need to be looking at line by line.
Could I ask Steve or Eric their thoughts as select board members now that they don't have a quorum here, that they could maybe, I'd just like to hear what they're thinking.
Um, I having been through a few scenarios in the past where planning board didn't have every T crossed and I dotted at town meeting, I would probably also be in favor of you withdrawing this article, given the state it's in and the fact that you're having a hearing on it, next Tuesday. Um, I I would I would I would support your decision to withdraw it from the warrant for this year.
And my thought is, would this fall in the category? Aren't there certain zoning articles that don't pass town meeting, you can't bring them up for 2 years? If this actually failed town meeting, would you not be eligible to bring it up in 2 years?
Not sure because of what Milton's going through, where they are allowed to revote it, so it must not. And this one only requires a simple majority, not a super majority. They, like the state, so eager to get this on that they made some unusual laws
Okay,
around it.
so the
So
MGL, they exempted from the 2 years and the 2/3 as well. That's interesting.
I don't know if they exempt from the 2 years, but I know
Okay.
that they exempted it from the 2/3. So that's why I'm kind of looking at. I think they're trying to do everything as possible to give you the time to get it passed, but I don't know about the 2 years.
Did Milton did Milton outright reject? I know they're a town, not a city. Did they outright reject it at their town meeting? They didn't.
They
They just
passed
withdrew.
it,
Okay.
and now they've got tonight. It was supposed to be tonight and got moved to tomorrow to do another vote. There's a group trying to repeal it. Jeremy
There
might
was
have more updates.
Yeah, there was a recall after it was approved at town meeting, but then there was a citizens recall on the vote. So they had to revisit.
That's interesting. I don't want to take up too much time here, but they held another town meeting to basically recall it, or is it one of those things where it's a representative town meeting doesn't close for so many days after?
They have yet to
After
hold another town meeting, but there was a recall and there was a ballot vote, and the ballot vote rescinded the vote or action at town meeting. So now,
That's interesting.
yeah, so the ballot vote basically undid the town meeting action. So they do
I do
not
think
have a
something.
3A zoning bylaw in place.
It's funny. I was thinking to myself beforehand. I have doubts this is past 2/3, but it might pass majority. There are going to be people, no matter what, are just going to reject anything that smells like more development. That's a waning majority to me, or waning population based on the special town meeting we had for the Coolidge Corner there. But that's always going to be in there. Yeah, I think unless you're ducks in a row, I think this one's going to be difficult. Unless you think you can really line up everything in the next few weeks and explain perfectly, it's going to be a tough one. But then your back's going to be against the wall for the next town meeting next year, unless we think we're going to hold a special in the fall.
Well, you could help with that.
What's that?
I said you could help with that.
Yeah, that's a
Making
select
that
board
happen.
call. So,
I mean, do we think we're going to have anything for a special in the fall, or do you think it's going to be? Is there nothing that's popped up yet that we know about?
Well, we have this. We have potentially the solar.
Yeah.
right. There could be some zoning articles, Eric, that might be timely.
Okay. If that's the case, then yeah, I would urge caution.
Yeah,
Stephen, out on this one, yeah.
I know when I read that letter, it just seemed to me that that the EOH LDC or whatever it is, they were just looking for some more detail and clarification in the maps and the number of properties and you know, like you said, I mean, in the calculation, it didn't seem like it was that huge of an ask that we had to do this, but I guess that's just my naivety on this process as well. But you know, that's why I haven't said too much and just deferring to those who know a lot more than I do.
I'm gonna
My
say even
concern is,
I'm. Oh, go ahead.
go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
Eric. No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that, I'll be the first to say that, I don't know the details behind this. In fact, that's why I'm kind of sitting in this meeting. I want to attend the hearing. I was gonna actually have a meeting with Heidi at some point just to kind of learn more. I've read a fair amount about it, but still a fair amount. I still want to know some more details. I'd be curious what other communities are doing too. Wouldn't surprise me if some communities outright chose to reject it and just not pass it, especially communities that aren't actually on a commuter rail line. And I think they tried. They did an okay job with some of the things about water supply and so on. But I think it's still like, think about it. We're next to Framingham. Framingham's on the commuter rail. We're not. And you couldn't ask for more different demographic and just zone towns. And they're trying to make this thing fit down, all fit one, whatever it is, fit everything. It'd be interesting to see what other communities do, but I don't know the details of the issues really behind this. I really don't. So
Yeah, so
that's why
far,
I'm kind of. Mhm.
yeah, so far the only one that's had an issue right now has been Milton. All the ones that were required to make the December 30, 23 cutoff passed. And then there's some that are for December 24 cutoff. We are December 25, and I'm going to some of the meetings. Most of them seem to be moving forward and expect that they're going to pass it. So it
Okay.
is interesting that most are in favor because it is creating zoning, not necessarily requiring building the units. That's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Although Hopkinton's take was very interesting. Hopkinton has a group that's coming in. They're saying they're against it because they're concerned that once they pass this, the state's going to see that no one's building it, and then the state's going to try and put something in to require them to build it or do something by an eminent domain to take the land to build it. So because they're right next to the commuter station is what they're looking at. So it's just a very different, like I hadn't heard this take from anyone, but
Yeah.
they're concerned that the state's going to realize in 5 years that it's not creating any units, just created the zoning.
They might have something. Hopkins is a bit gun shy when Western Developments went down or whatever, and they developed. They went to this massive boon, and they're reeling right now due to the expansion of school systems and stuff like
Right,
that.
right. So
They can
it's,
be gun shy of anything, to be
yeah.
honest.
Now, my concern is with the map that now we have these residents that want to add in the property. We have not had those maps done by any technical group yet to calculate out the percentages or figure out yet what is really mixed use versus family. That hasn't been done. So I don't want to end up in something that happened with like the solar where the map wasn't published correctly. And I just don't think have enough time, especially on the hearing. What if another resident comes up and says, I don't want this? Historical Society comes up and says, no, you can't put those parcels in there. I don't even think we have a true map yet. So,
Okay, yeah, that's gonna be tough to develop.
yeah.
So
May I have a motion to request the select board remove the 3A zoning from this Springtown meeting?
Looks like Rob is frozen. So I guess I'll have to move it.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, been moved by Frank, seconded by Will. Is there any further discussion on this issue?
I'm sorry, my connection was very unstable and I couldn't hear the motion.
Motion was to make a request to request the select board remove the 3A zoning bylaw from this town meeting.
Warrant from this time meeting.
The warrant, right? The warrant, not the bylaw. But we'll continue to work on the bylaw, but that for this town meeting, the language is not ready for the February 22nd deadline.
Mhm. Okay.
So it was moved and seconded. I guess take a roll call vote. Addie Mae is aye. Frank?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Will?
Aye.
Okay, so the motion passes. We will request, we will ask the select board to remove the warrant from the warrant, the article from the warrant.
And that process is also in writing,
With
and who does that?
I believe it would be in writing as well. And we will send a letter, and I will happy to, I guess, CC you all that this goes to the select board.
Right, so I have to add the solar back in onto the hearing because it had been published in the paper, and Heather from town council said we should open the hearing. And then in the hearings announced that we're going to close the hearing and not go forward with the solar and the 3A if that's what we decided tonight. We will still be going forward with the affordable housing one. So
So the hearing was posted for all three for next Tuesday, correct? So
except then when we voted to move the solar, I had amended that agenda, but now I'm gonna have to amend it again to add it in so that we officially remove it.
okay, but I think the affordable housing bylaw had one sentence in there that referred to the 3A.
Right.
So next week when we open the hearing on the three articles, we will need to open the hearing, and we thought we were all nailed down with the language, and the language, I think, Will did a great job cleaning it up, and we all supported it and voted on it. But if 3A, we did one sentence in there that assumed that 3A would go first at the town meeting in spring and pass, and therefore I believe we need to take that language out, and so we'll address that next Tuesday at the opening of the hearing, just because otherwise the language is ready for the February 22nd deadline to the select board, but that line is problematic. And as I said, there's still value in having the conversation and the hearing on 3A next week with the consultants. And it, better to learn, pros, cons, people's thoughts on the issues now, and then be able to maybe address them with time.
So I won't send out those abutter notices to come to the hearing just in case we don't know what the map's going to do. And now that we have time, we'll be scheduling another hearing sometime later in the fall, maybe or that has to be all reposted again.
I think that's fair.
I don't know, it's if the calculation is that we do need to have those extra houses, I don't know why.
But we don't have that,
them.
we don't have that back yet. Like we have to get that defined because if it changes one lot, then there's other people I have to notify. So I kind of want to say, once we have firmed our map up, then I'm fine saying I'll get the abutters list from the assessor for whatever those parcels are. It just, if the historical district comes back and says we can't include the ones on Elliott Street, something, I don't know. I just don't feel like
but this is informational. I don't know why we wouldn't want to just tell people we're having this information session. It's their choice whether they come. I mean, it's also publicly.
The hearing on this has gone out, and the information has been on the town website. So
right. I was just
told about the hearing on February 20th.
Yeah, I mean, I can still mail the letters out tomorrow. That's what the plan was going to be. But and I'll go ahead, like you said, Frank, it is informational. And more information out to the residents is probably better.
There was already a townwide mailing though, correct?
I did a townwide mailing, but these were to the abutters that it just like as a courtesy that they need to know that the map changed.
How many letters is it roughly?
This will probably be about another 30 something.
And they're pretty much prepared.
Well, I've got the list and I've got a letter down. I was going to see if Jeremy had any other comments, but I think I'd already forwarded that to you on the letter. So I was just going to, get the envelopes done tomorrow.
I mean, to a certain extent, the more prompts to get people engaged in discussing this, especially if we are having a hearing, the better. It's always better for us to have more people engaged. So I guess go ahead and
Yeah, I'm fine sending it out. I just didn't know if, we may be having to send out different notices again at the next time, so.
Yep, most likely we will.
Yeah.
Is there anything else for discussion at this meeting? If not, if there are no other issues to address this meeting, we have a motion to adjourn unless someone has something. All right, hearing none, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Further discussion? Hearing none. To vote to adjourn the meeting, Frank?
Aye.
Addie May is aye. Robert?
Aye.
And Will?
Aye.
Time 9:26 p.m. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you all next Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Hi, everybody.